Before I start writing, let me quickly check the front-end design skill to make sure the writing style fits American audiences perfectly actually. This is pure prose, no UI involved. Let me go straight into the story. He dropped the envelope on the table in front of me and said, loud enough for everyone at the rehearsal dinner to hear, "Sign it, old man. You've been living off my name long enough." I picked it up, I opened it, and I looked at my son across that table and said, "Are you sure this is what you want?" He pointed at the signature line and said, "You're nothing but dead weight. You always have been. Before I go any further, thank you for being here with me tonight. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. Your city, your state. I want to know who's in this room with me." One quick note. This story draws on real events but contains fictional elements shaped for the telling. The names, the places those have been changed. The lesson at the end of it is the one thing I won't change at all. The rain had been coming down since before I woke up. I knew because I'd left the truck window cracked the night before, and by the time I got out to the driveway at 5:15 in the morning, the passenger seat had a dark stain spreading across it the way water does when it's had hours to work. I didn't curse about it. I got the shop towels from the garage, pressed them down, and went back inside to finish my coffee. My name is Walter Greer. I'm 64 years old, and on the morning of my son's rehearsal dinner, I drove my 2009 Chevy Silverado through the back roads of Beaufort County, South Carolina, with a thermos of black coffee and a set of work gloves on the seat beside me, the same gloves I'd owned since my father gave them a pair just like them when I was 19 years old and still learning what it meant to earn something. Most mornings I don't think about where I'm going. I just go. Tidewater Marina sits at the end of a 2-lane road off Highway 21, and in the gray before sunrise it looks the same way it always has to me, not like a business, but like something that pulled itself up out of the marsh and the salt water on its own, stubborn and permanent, the way things get when they've survived enough storms. 42 boat slips, a dry storage facility, a bait and tackle shop, a fuel dock, and 3 acres of property along the creek that my father bought in 1971, when nobody in their right mind wanted commercial waterfront in that part of the county. He bought it because he understood what other people couldn't see yet. I finished what he started. The parking lot was empty when I pulled in. I cut the engine, pulled on the gloves, and walked the dock. The rain had led up to a mist. The creek was flat and gray, the color of old pewter, and the only sound was water against the pilings and the distant call of something in the marsh I couldn't see. I walked the length of the main dock the way I walk it every morning, checking the cleats, the bumpers, the state of the boards underfoot. There's a loose plank at slip 19 that I've been meaning to sister for a month. I crouched down and checked it. "Morning, Walt." Ray Delacroix was already on the fuel dock, coiling line with the particular efficiency of a man who has performed the same task so many times that his hands do it without any instruction from his brain. Ray had been with me at Tidewater for 17 years. He was 53, built narrow and strong, with hands that were permanently stained from a decade of working engines before I moved him to dock management. "Ray," I said. He fell into step beside me as I moved toward the storage building. Neither of us needed to fill the silence. We'd long ago used up our requirement for morning conversation. We worked the fuel dock first, then checked the storage unit inventory, then walked the perimeter of the property along the creek bank, where the storm had pushed debris against the fencing. The work had a rhythm I knew in my shoulders and my lower back. My father had taught me to move efficiently, not quickly. "Efficiency lasts," he used to say. "Speed is just efficiency in a hurry." At 6:30, a silver Mercedes SUV turned into the lot. New tires, tinted windows. It parked in the space closest to the office door, the space with the small sign that said, "Reserved Management." Ray watched it without expression. "That's my son," I said. Ray didn't answer right away. He bent down and picked up a piece of driftwood from the path and tossed it into the marsh. "Big night tonight," he said finally. "The rehearsal dinner." I turned back to the fence line. 120 guests. Full service at the Harborview room. Ray made a sound in the back of his throat that was not quite a word. "You going?" he asked. I reached into my jacket and took out the card I'd found in my mailbox 2 evenings before. Heavy cream stock, embossed lettering, my name printed clearly across the front. I turned it over so Ray could see the line beneath it. "Walter Greer, Marina staff." Ray read it. The muscle along his jaw moved once. "I'll be there," I said. I put the card back in my jacket pocket. "Go ahead and make sure the AV system in the Harborview room is tested and running before 4 o'clock, I said. "Full test. And tell whoever's running sound tonight, don't touch the archive setting. Not for any reason." Ray looked at me for a moment with the expression he'd used on me maybe 10 times in 17 years. The one that meant he understood more than I'd said, and he was choosing not to ask for the rest. "All right," he said. We finished the fence line and moved back toward the dock. The sky was beginning to lighten at the edges over the marsh. That particular gray turning silver that means morning is making its decision. My thermos was empty. My knees ached the way they always did in damp weather now. A quiet, familiar ache I'd stopped mentioning to anyone. I had built every foot of what stood around me. Tonight, someone was going to try to hand it away. The envelope had been in my coat pocket since I found it 2 days earlier, and by the time I got home that evening I still hadn't decided exactly what I was going to do about the dinner. I hung my coat on the hook by the back door, pulled off my boots, set them on the mat. Diane was at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she hadn't touched, staring at the grain of the wood the way she does when her mind is somewhere else entirely. She looked up when I came in, and her eyes went directly to my coat pocket. "They sent you a card," she said. It wasn't a question. "Marina staff," I said. Diane set her cup down with a small, careful movement and pressed both palms flat on the table. After 37 years, I knew what that stillness meant. It meant she was choosing between several things she could say and deciding not to say any of them yet. "Sit down, Walter," she said. I sat. The kitchen was warm and smelled like the cedar cleaner she used on the floors, and underneath it, the particular smell of this house, old wood, salt air that had worked its way into the walls over 25 years, the ghost of every meal cooked in this room since the year we moved in. I had built this house the summer after we got married. Framed it myself over 2 seasons on weekends when the marina work allowed. My father had driven down from Columbia to help me set the ridge beam. "Tell me about your father," Diane said. "The whole story, from the beginning. Because tomorrow you're going to walk into that room and I need to understand exactly what you're walking into." Her eyes were steady on mine, green at the outer edges, darker toward the center. The same eyes that had looked at me across a folding table at a church fish fry in the spring of 1987 when she was 24 and I was 27, and neither of us had any clear idea what the next 4 decades were going to ask of us. I put my hands over hers on the table. "All right," I said. "From the beginning. My father, Harold Greer, came to Beaufort County in the winter of 1968 with $400. A used truck, and a particular stubbornness that I later understood was the most valuable thing he owned. He got work on a shrimp boat out of Port Royal. He got up before 4 every morning and came home after dark and saved money with the discipline of a man who had grown up with nothing and intended to make sure that condition was temporary. In 1971, he walked the property at the end of the road, off Highway 21. 2 acres of waterfront marsh, a rotting dock, and a cinder-block structure that had been a bait shop and was now barely a building. Nobody wanted it. The county assessor had it listed at $3,200, which was still considered optimistic by everyone who knew anything about that stretch of creek. My father bought it. He paid $2,800 in cash. He borrowed the remaining $400 from the woman who ran the boarding house where he rented a room, and he paid her back in 6 weeks. I was born 3 years later. I grew up understanding that our family had land the way other families have a name, not because anyone handed it to us, but because my father looked at something no one else wanted and understood what it could become. He put a hammer in my hands when I was 8. When I was 16, he walked me out to the end of the main dock on a January morning, the water flat and cold below us, the marsh stretching out in every direction, and he swept his arm across the whole of it. "What do you see?" he said. "Nothing much," I said. He nodded slowly, like I'd said something sharp instead of something obvious. "That's right." He looked out at the water. "Most people drive past this road and see a rundown boat dock on a county creek. They don't stop. They don't look twice. That is exactly why we are safe. The day this place looks like something is the day people start making calculations. You understand?" I didn't. "Not then." "I understand now," I told Diane. She squeezed my hands. "Keep going." My father died in the spring of 2001. He was 71 years old, and he went the way he'd always said he wanted to, which was working. His heart gave out on a Tuesday morning while he was walking the property line along the back of the dry storage lot, checking the fence posts the way he checked them every spring. They found him sitting on a dock, piling with his hands in his lap and his face turned toward the water. He left me the property, the business which by then had expanded to 40 slips and a full-service marina, and the operating company, which I had quietly incorporated 11 years earlier under the name Tidewater Holdings, LLC. He left those documents with his attorney, Warren Buist, who had handled our family's legal affairs since 1988. Warren managed the probate in 2002 without a single challenge, because there was no one to challenge it, and nothing about the transaction that was visible to anyone who wasn't looking for it specifically. He also left one other thing. He left Diane an envelope, her name written on the front in his careful, deliberate hand. He told me only, "Give it to her when I'm gone. She'll know when to open it." "I still have it," Diane said quietly. I looked at her. "I never opened it," she said. Her voice dropped the way it does when something costs her. 23 years, Walter. It's in the drawer by the bed. I look at it sometimes. "I thought you would tell the children first. I always thought I'd open it after that." The words settled between us on the kitchen table with a weight that had been building for a long time. "I know," I said. "Tomorrow," she said. Not a threat, not an accusation, just the word that meant the road had run out. I sat at the kitchen table long after Diane went to bed, with an empty coffee cup in front of me and the kind of quiet that only exists when the house is asleep and you're left alone with what you've been putting off. The first time I understood what money does to people, not to the person who has it, but to the person who finds out about it, I was 34 years old and sitting on the porch of this house with a man named Glenn Pruitt. Glenn and I had been friends since grade school. Same church, same Little League, same parking lot behind the hardware store in high school. The kind of friendship you trust without thinking about it. The way you trust a road you've driven 1,000 times. One evening, I told him the truth. My father had been gone 2 years. Tidewater was growing. I had a business worth more than either of us could have imagined when we were throwing a football in a dirt lot. I told him the numbers. I told him because I was tired of carrying it alone, and he was the person I trusted most outside of Diane. 2 months later, he walked into my office and sat across my desk with a folded piece of paper. "I've got a developer from Hilton Head interested in the back acreage," he said. "Good money. We split it." I stared at him. "Your daddy already said he'd consider something like this before he passed," Glenn said. My father had been dead for 2 years. He had never said any such thing to anyone. I knew that with the certainty, I knew the load capacity of every slip on the main dock. I took the paper. "Read the number." Folded it back up. "Get out of my office, Glenn," I said, "and don't come back." He stood up, took the paper, and left. I never spoke to him again. I sat in that office for a long time afterward. My chest felt hollow in a way that had nothing to do with the money, and everything to do with the 34 years I had believed I knew who Glenn Pruitt was. That evening I made myself a rule I've kept ever since. Nobody finds out what you have until you decide they need to know. Not friends, not neighbors, and God help me, not even family. Because the moment the number is in the air changes, and you can never get back to what was there before. I told myself I was protecting my children from that change. Standing at the kitchen sink at midnight the night before everything came apart, I said out loud to the empty room, "You were protecting yourself." My own voice startled me. I poured the cold coffee down the drain. I had made Diane a promise when our son Marcus turned 27. We were sitting on the back porch watching the sun drop behind the tree line, and I told her, "When Marcus turns 32, I'll sit him down and tell him everything. The company, the property, the numbers, all of it." Diane had looked at me with those steady green eyes and nodded once. Marcus turned 32. I sat across from him at the Thanksgiving table and thought, not yet. He's still finding himself. He turned 35. I watched him at Christmas talking too loud, laughing at things that weren't quite funny, trying to fill a room the way men do when they're not yet sure they belong in it. I thought, he's not ready. He turned 38. Somewhere between 32 and 38, the window I'd been waiting for had quietly closed, and I hadn't noticed until it was already gone. The one thing I had done was pay for his education. Marcus got into the business school at the University of South Carolina. He called me on a Friday night with his voice cracking between disbelief and something close to joy. "Dad, Dad, I got in." "Good," I said. "I'm proud of you, son." I got off the phone, walked out to the dock in the dark, stood there with the creek moving below me and the stars appearing one at a time over the marsh, and I let the feeling come up through my chest until my shoulders shook and I cried in the dark where nobody could see me. The following Monday, I called Warren Buist and arranged a third-party payment of $94,000 directly to the university's bursar office. No name attached to Marcus's account, just a cleared balance. The IRS allows it. He would see only that his tuition was paid. He would not see where the money came from. He never asked. I told myself that was his way of not wanting to burden me. Standing in the kitchen after midnight the night before the dinner, I finally admitted what it actually was. It was a son who had learned that certain things in his father's life were not to be examined closely. And I had taught him that, one unanswered question at a time. The person who opened the door to what came next was me. Marcus called on a Tuesday in September, 2 years ago. His voice had a brightness in it I hadn't heard in a while. He wanted to bring someone home for Christmas. Her name was Brianna. Her family was from Charleston. He thought I'd like her. Diane looked at me from across the kitchen when I got off the phone. "He sounds like himself," she said. "The old version." "He does," I agreed. Christmas that year was warm for December, the way it can be down here. Marcus arrived the Wednesday before with Brianna Aldworth in the passenger seat of a car that was a better model than anything my son had driven before. Brianna was 30, dark-haired, with the particular poise of someone raised in a household where how you present yourself is considered a form of character. She shook my hand, looked me straight in the eye, and said it was a real pleasure to meet me. She also spent the first 20 minutes of being in our house taking careful inventory of it. I watched her eyes. She was looking at the age of the appliances, the single-pane windows in the living room, the 20-year-old truck in the driveway. Diane noticed too. I could tell by the half-second pause before she offered to take Brianna's coat. Brianna's father arrived Christmas morning, Carver Aldworth. He drove a Cadillac XT6, stepped out in a vest over a dress shirt, and had the handshake of a man who had spent his career making sure his handshake communicated something. "Great to finally meet you, Walter," he said, gripping my hand. "Marcus has told me a lot about you." Something settled briefly in his face when he said my name. Just a fraction. The look of a man confirming something he wasn't fully certain of. I filed it away without knowing why. Dinner was good. Marcus was relaxed in a way he hadn't been around me in years. Brianna's mother, Ellen, was warm and practical and helped Diane in the kitchen without being asked. I liked Elty right away. Carver asked about the marina 4 times. Each time, smooth and conversational, the way a man gathers information while appearing to make small talk. "Beautiful property out there on the creek. You've been working at Tidewater a long time. Must know every inch of those docks by now. The ownership group, do you know them well?" I imagine a man in your position sees a lot about how a place really runs. Each time I answered simply, "Yes, a long time. I do know it well. Not personally, no." Each time Carver nodded and moved the conversation somewhere else. After dinner, Marcus and Carver took their coffee to the back porch. My daughter, Cassie, who had driven down from Charlotte, came and stood beside me at the kitchen window. We watched the two of them through the glass, Carver doing most of the talking, Marcus nodding along with the attentiveness of a man who has found someone whose certainty feels like guidance. "Dad," Cassie said, keeping her voice low. "I know," I said. "He asked me 3 questions about you tonight," she said. "Just you, not the family. You, specifically." Her jaw was tight and her mug was in both hands. "It felt like he was running a search," she said. I looked at my daughter. She was 33 and had her mother's eyes and her grandfather's instincts. In her life, she had not yet been wrong about a person in any way that mattered. "I'll keep an eye on it," I said. Cassie made a sound that meant she'd already moved past keeping an eye on it, but she let it go. Later that night, after the Aldworths had left for their hotel and Marcus was asleep in his old room, Diane sat across from me at the kitchen table and folded her hands. "Carver Aldworth looked at this house," she said, "the way a man looks at something he's trying to appraise." My chest tightened. "I know," I said. "He knows who you are, Walter." Her voice was quiet and certain. I don't know how, but he knows. Outside, the first cold rain of the winter had started, soft and tentative, the kind that doesn't commit. I'll call Warren tomorrow, I said. Diane nodded once and went to bed. I stayed at the table watching the rain and thinking about the small, settling expression on Carver Aldworth's face when he said my name for the first time. That tiny flicker of confirmation. He had known exactly who he was shaking hands with. Warren Buist called me the Monday after Christmas. I did some looking into Carver Aldworth, he said. Business filings, civil court records, professional history. He paused in the way Warren pauses when what he's found is serious. He's been involved as a consultant or silent partner in 3 separate marina and waterfront property acquisitions over the past 15 years, Warren said. In 2 of those cases, the original owner sold under terms that were considerably below market value. In the 3rd, the owner has since filed suit. He's patient, Walter, and he's organized. I thanked him and got off the phone and stood at the window looking out at the creek for a long time. Then I did nothing, because Marcus was happy in a way I hadn't seen in years, and I told myself happiness deserved a chance before I brought lawyers into it. That was the first mistake of that season. The following Thanksgiving, Marcus came home alone. Brianna was with her family on Kiowa Island. He arrived late, quieter than usual. With the distracted quality of a man whose mind is running calculations, his face can't quite conceal. We ate at the kitchen table, just Diane, Marcus, Cassie, and me. My other son, Thomas, was in Denver. He couldn't make it. After dinner, Marcus and I sat on the back dock in the cold. The creek was black and still. The lights of the marina reflected in broken lines off the surface. "Dad," Marcus said, "I want you to know something. You've worked your whole life. It's time you let someone carry some of this." My chest pulled the way it does when you hear something that has 2 meanings. "I'm fine, son," I said. "I know you're fine." He turned to look at me. I'm in a position now where I have the experience to actually help manage things. You shouldn't have to be out there on the docks every morning at 64. He meant it. Whatever else was tangled up in what was coming. On that dock in the dark, my son meant every word. "I know," I said. "Thank you, Marcus." That was the last real conversation we had. Before she drove back to Charlotte, Cassie pulled me aside in the driveway. Her breath made small clouds in the December air. "Dad," she said, "I need to tell you something Marcus said to me last year." Her jaw was set the way it gets when something has been sitting in her chest too long. We were at a bar in Charlotte. He'd had a couple drinks. He looked at me and said she stopped. Pressed her lips together, he said, "Cassie, Dad always looked at you differently because you came to work at the marina that summer after college and I didn't. He thinks I never cared about the place. And he's never going to say it, but I know." Something dropped through the center of my chest. "I told him that was ridiculous," Cassie said, her voice rough at the edges. "He wasn't listening. He just kept saying, you looked at him like a disappointment." Her free hand went flat against her sternum like she was holding something in. "Dad," she said, "I think that's where Carver got his opening. Not a scheme from the outside. A door Marcus had already left unlocked from the inside." I stood in the driveway after her taillights disappeared, and the cold came through my jacket, and I let it. My son had spent years believing I thought less of him, and I had never said a single word to correct it. Warren called me the following March. The careful call of a man who has found something specific. "Come to my office," he said, in person. I drove to his office in Beaufort the next morning. Warren had been my attorney for 22 years. He was 63, deliberate in his movements and his words. A man who understood that precision is a form of courtesy. He opened a folder and turned it to face me across his desk. "Someone has been conducting a private investigation into the ownership structure of Tidewater Holdings, LLC, he said. "Public record searches, some attempts to access county filings through indirect channels. The trail goes back to a firm in Charleston. The firm represents Carver Aldworth." My jaw tightened. I had been waiting for this. "How long?" I asked. Warren folded his hands. "Based on what I can establish, at least 7 months. Possibly longer." He pulled a second page from the folder. "There is a document, Walter. A transfer agreement. Already drafted. Your name appears on it as the signatory. The date line is blank." The office was very quiet. Outside, The rain that had been falling all morning made a soft sound against the window. "He's had it ready for 7 months," I said. "At minimum," Warren said. This was not an impulse. This had a plan and a timeline behind it. I leaned back in my chair and thought about Carver Aldworth at my kitchen table, asking his 4 careful questions. The small look of confirmation when he said my name for the first time. "There's more," Warren said. He produced another page. "Aldworth has been in preliminary discussions with a commercial real estate investment group out of Atlanta called Coastal Equity Partners. He has provided them with operational data on Tidewater Marina occupancy rates, fuel revenue, slip lease, income, infrastructure assessments." Warren looked at me steadily. "He provided this information as though he had the authority to represent the property. He does not. Beyond that, he has already shown the Atlanta group a letter of intent. He signed it on their behalf 5 weeks ago. He's trying to sell Tidewater," I said. "He was," Warren said. "Under South Carolina law, what Mr. Aldworth has done constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty if he has any formal management role, and tortious interference with business relations regardless. The letter of intent with Coastal Equity exposes him to significant civil liability." I sat with that for a moment. 7 months. A drafted document with my name already on it. A letter of intent with an Atlanta investment group. Carver Aldworth had spent years building toward this one moment, this one pen in one room. "What do you want to do?" Warren asked. "I want to wait," I said. Warren's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. "You have grounds to act today," he said carefully. "I need to know where Marcus is in this," I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. "I need to know whether my son walked into Carver's plan with his eyes open, or whether Carver walked him in with the lights off." I looked at Warren across the desk. "Because those are 2 different things, and I'm not going to treat them the same way until I know which one it is." Warren held my gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once. "I'll keep monitoring," he said. "You call me the moment this moves toward action." I reached into my coat pocket and took out the small notebook I'd carried since my father died, worn cover, soft pages, and opened it to an entry from 2018. I set it on the desk. Warren read the handwriting, the number, the single line beneath it. "Not Harold's place to sell. Not mine either. Belongs to Beaufort County. There was an outside offer that year," I said. "A development group out of Savannah. Good money." I turned it down. Warren looked up. "Carver Aldworth has never known about that offer," I said. "If he had, he'd have understood something important." I picked up the notebook and put it back in my pocket. This place was never going to be for sale. Not to his Atlanta group, not to anyone. And the man who thinks he's about to hand it to a team of commercial developers is going to find that out in a room with 120 people watching. I stood up, buttoned my coat, and walked out into the March rain. 3 weeks later, Marcus called on a Tuesday morning while I was replacing a dock cleat on slip 12. My phone buzzed. I pulled off my glove and checked the screen. "Marcus." I set the wrench down and answered, "Dad." His voice had that tumbling brightness I recognized from years ago, the voice he had when something had happened that he hadn't fully processed yet. "Dad, I need to tell you. Carver offered me the managing director position. At Tidewater, full oversight slip operations, the shop, event bookings, everything. I stood on the dock in the March cold, with the creek moving below me, and let my son's happiness come through the phone. That's a significant role," I said. I know it is. But Carver says I'm ready. He says he's been watching how I handle myself for 2 years. He says I have the instincts for it." Marcus's voice softened. "I wanted you to be the first to know, Dad." "I'm glad you called," I said. A pause. "Are you proud of me?" The question landed with 40 years of weight behind it. "I'm always proud of you," I said. "I always have been." He made a sound that wasn't quite a word, and got off the phone shortly after. I stood on the dock, holding my phone for a long moment. Then I put my glove back on and picked up the wrench. What Marcus didn't know was that 8 months earlier, I had made a phone call to Carver Aldworth myself, before Warren had found the transfer document. Before I understood the full shape of what Carver was building, I had called because Marcus had been drifting for years and I didn't know how to reach him with words anymore. So I tried the only other thing I had. I asked Carver, as a man with hospitality management experience, to give Marcus a real responsibility at the marina. something with genuine ownership. Let him prove himself. Carver had agreed without a moment's hesitation. Of course he had. He was my employee. He couldn't have told me no. What I hadn't understood then was that he had already been planning to use Marcus as the instrument of the whole scheme, and my phone call had handed him the tool with the handle already pointing in the right direction. The night of the rehearsal dinner, Diane straightened my collar in the hallway mirror the way she had straightened it before every important thing we'd faced together. She studied my face for a moment. "Ready?" she said. I put my hand in my coat pocket. My father's worn notebook was there. "Yes," I said. We walked to the truck together. The Harborview room at Tidewater Marina held 200 people when the dividers were open. Tonight it was arranged for 120. Round tables with cream linens, low amber lighting. A floral arrangement on every table that I recognized had not come from our regular supplier. Someone had brought those in from outside. Someone had wanted to put their own mark on the room. The room was nearly full when Diane and I walked in. Our seats were at a table near the back, beside the service corridor. "Marina staff gets the rear," Diane murmured as I pulled out her chair. "Best view in the house," I said. Ray Delacroix was 3 tables over in a dark blazer, pressed and precise. He caught my eye across the room and gave me a small nod. The nod of a man who had done what he was asked and was prepared for what came next. Good. The AV system was running. Marcus stood near the front of the room with Brianna at his side, receiving congratulations with the slightly overwhelmed brightness of a man who cannot quite believe the evening is real. He looked well. He looked, for a moment, like the boy who used to call me from Columbia, just to talk. My chest pulled tight and I breathed through it. Cassie appeared at my elbow. "Dad," she said quietly, "Carver keeps looking over at you, and then away too fast." "I know," I said. She studied my face the way her mother does. "You're ready for whatever tonight is, aren't you?" she said. It wasn't entirely a question. "Have you talked to your brother lately?" I asked. Something moved across her face. Grief and frustration pressed together. "Not much," she said. "When he does call, it's about the marina, about his plans. He doesn't ask about us. He didn't used to be like that." "I know," I said. Carver Aldworth took the speaking position at 7 o'clock precisely. The room settled, the way rooms settle for someone who knows how to own them. I watched 120 people give him their attention and thought about the first time he had sat at my kitchen table and asked his 4 careful questions. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carver said, his voice filling the room I had built. "Thank you for joining us to celebrate a new chapter for Tidewater Marina and the exceptional young man stepping into its future." I reached into my coat pocket and felt the worn cover of my father's notebook. Then I picked up the dinner menu and began to read it. Carver found me between the salad and the main course. I had watched him working toward me for 8 minutes, stopping at tables, easy and unhurried. The way a man moves through a room when he wants to arrive somewhere without appearing to have intended it. He sat down in the empty chair beside me with the ease of an old acquaintance. "Walter." He set a dark leather portfolio on the table between his hand resting on top of it. "Good to see you here. Proud night for Marcus." "It is," I said. "I wanted to clear up a small piece of paperwork," he said. His voice was warm and practical, the voice of a man doing someone a favor. "Just a management clarity document, straightforward. It formalizes Marcus's role going forward, makes things cleaner on paper." He pushed the portfolio toward me and opened it to the first page. "Just needs your signature and we're finished." I picked it up. "Read the first page. The second." On the third page, I found what I was looking for. My name, typed in the signature block. Walter Raymond Greer. The date line next to it was blank. Below my name, the language was precise and unambiguous. All rights, interests, and ownership claims pertaining to Tidewater Holdings LLC and its subsidiaries, including Tidewater Marina and associated property, to be transferred in full to Marcus Harold Greer and Brianna Lynn Greer jointly. Jointly, not just Marcus. Brianna, too. I set the portfolio down and looked at Carver. "I'll need to read this more carefully," I said. His smile didn't waver. "Of course. But don't take all night, Walter. This is a celebration. No need for paperwork to slow things down." He moved away, easy and confident. I sat with the portfolio in front of me and breathed. Diane leaned close. "What is it?" "Everything," I said quietly. The whole company. To Marcus and Brianna jointly. This was prepared months ago. I turned the page so she could see it. Her breath came out slow and controlled. She looked at the page for a long moment. Then she looked at me. She understood. I saw the shift in Marcus before he started moving toward us. Carver had touched his arm, said something brief, and the ease went out of my son's posture, replaced by something squared up and deliberate, the look of a man who has been reminded of something he has been putting off. He picked up his champagne glass. He walked toward our table. Thomas saw him coming. He set his fork down and straightened in his chair. Cassie's hand went still on her wineglass. Marcus stopped at the edge of our table. He stood over me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, something between conviction and discomfort. The expression of a man who has rehearsed what he's about to do and is saying it loudly enough inside his own head that he can't hear anything else. Dad. His voice came out higher than the room required. Tables nearby turned. I need you to sign this tonight. It's past time. You've been hovering over this marina for 30 years, and I'm the one running it now. You don't have to carry this anymore. Just sign the paper and let me take it from here. He set his champagne glass down on the table and took the portfolio and opened it to the signature page. His hand was not entirely steady. Sign it, Dad. His voice rose another register. You've done your part. You're nothing but dead weight now. You always have been. The words went into the room the way a stone goes into still water. The music from the speakers continued for 3 more seconds. Then it faded, and the room was absolutely silent in the way rooms go silent when something irreversible has been said. 120 people. Not a fork moving, not a glass lifting. I looked at my son standing over me with his finger on a signature line and his face flushed and his hand still trembling slightly. And I felt something move through me that was not anger and was not grief, but something older than both the particular pain of watching the thing you were most afraid of become real. I reached for the portfolio. Not for the pen, for the portfolio. I opened it to the first page. I began to read aloud, not shouting, not standing, in the same voice I use when I'm reviewing a maintenance log or checking a lease agreement. Steady, clear, unhurried, and the words of the document filled the silent room the way water finds every low place. Transfer agreement, I read, entered into by Walter Raymond Greer, hereinafter the transferring party, and Marcus Harold Greer and Brianna Lynn Greer, hereinafter the receiving parties. In consideration of the foregoing, the transferring party agrees to relinquish all ownership rights, interests, and claims pertaining to Tidewater Holdings, LLC, including Tidewater Marina, all associated waterfront property, revenues, and contractual agreements. I looked up. That's me, I said to the room. The transferring party. Everything I own. To be signed away tonight. Marcus's flush had deepened. Carver had appeared at the edge of the table, behind Marcus's right shoulder, and his face was doing something complicated, the controlled expression of a man running a rapid recalculation. Then the chair beside Carver scraped back hard against the floor. Diane stood up. She did not raise her voice. 37 years of marriage had given her a register below, shouting that carries farther than shouting ever could. Marcus Allen Greer, she said. Marcus turned. When he met his mother's eyes, some of the certainty left his face the way a flame loses height in a draft. You called your father dead weight, Diane said, in front of 120 people, in a building he owns. Her voice did not shake. I want you to think very carefully about who taught you that word for your father, and why. Marcus opened his mouth. Diane held up one hand, not aggressive, just final, and he closed it. Thomas was on his feet before anyone saw him move. He came around the table and stopped 2 feet from his brother and turned to face him. And when he spoke, there was a rawness in his voice. I recognized the sound of something that has been held in for a long time and has run out of room. Do you know, Thomas said, his jaw so tight the words came out clipped, that I have been sending Mom and Dad $400 a month for 4 years. His hands at his sides were shaking with the effort of containing what was behind them. Because I thought Dad was just the dock guy. I thought he was struggling. I didn't want them to go without. He took 1 step toward his brother. And you had access to the management files. You saw what was coming in. And tonight you stood up there, and you thanked Carver Aldworth for giving you your career. You didn't say Dad's name, not once. Marcus stared at his brother. Something moved behind his eyes. The beginning of something. Then Carver put a hand on Marcus's shoulder, and the moment closed. Cassie didn't stand up. She reached into her jacket pocket, took out her phone, opened the camera, and pointed it at Marcus and Carver without a word. "Put that away," Marcus said. "Keep going," Cassie said. Her hand was steady as the dock on a flat, calm morning. The Harborview room door opened. I had not seen Cassie leave the table, but I heard the click of heels crossing the room 2 minutes earlier. And now she was back from the lobby, and behind her came Warren Buist, unhurried, briefcase in hand, moving through the room the way he always moved, like a man with nowhere urgent to be and nothing to prove by arriving quickly. He didn't look at Carver. He looked at me. I gave him the smallest nod. Carver saw Warren cross the room. I watched the moment of recognition, a tightening around his eyes, a recalculation firing fast behind his expression. 7 months of researching Tidewater Holdings had put Warren Buist's name on every significant document. Carver knew exactly who had just walked in. He recovered quickly. "Walter," he said, stepping forward past Marcus, turning slightly so the nearby tables could hear him making the moment reasonable. "This is a straightforward document. A father who wants good things for his son signs the paper and lets the man take his rightful place. There is no other choice tonight that makes sense." He set the pen on the table in front of me with a small, precise click. 120 people watched that pen sit on the table. "I would like my attorney to review this first," I said, out loud. "For everyone in this room." Carver's jaw tightened by a fraction. Warren pulled out the chair at the nearest empty table, set his briefcase on it, and opened it with the methodical efficiency of a man who has been preparing for this specific room for weeks. "Before any document is executed tonight," Warren said, his voice carrying without effort, "I want to clarify the legal standing of what's in front of Mr. Greer." He set a single page on the table beside the portfolio. Under South Carolina law, a transfer of LLC ownership requires notarized signatures, independent legal counsel for the transferring party, and full written disclosure of the company's current assessed value. This document contains none of those. Additionally, it is being presented to Mr. Greer in a public setting, following a direct verbal attack on his character by his own son. He looked at Carver. "Those circumstances constitute duress. A document signed under duress is voidable at any time by the signing party." The room was absolutely still. Furthermore, Warren continued in the same unhurried tone, "The transfer language in this document does not convey management authority. It conveys full ownership. This is not a housekeeping document. It is a transfer of a privately held company currently valued at," he glanced at his notes, $67 million. $67 million. The number moved through the room the way a wave moves. You could see it travel. The small shifts in posture, the involuntary adjustments, the way the air changed. A man at the center table set his wine glass down very carefully. Marcus's champagne glass was still in his hand. He set it on the nearest surface without looking at it. He was staring at Warren. Carver's voice came out lower. The warmth had gone entirely. "This is a private family matter. Your involvement here." "I represent Tidewater Holdings, LLC, Warren said. "That makes it my professional matter, not a personal one." He looked at Carver with the patient eyes of a man who has spent 22 years in rooms exactly like this one, "and I believe there are several other things the people in this room should know." He set 2 more pages on the table. The letterhead on the top page was visible from several feet away. "Coastal Equity Partners, Atlanta, Georgia. Mr. Carver Aldworth, in his capacity as a hospitality consultant advising Tidewater Marina's managing director, entered into preliminary negotiations with Coastal Equity Partners of Atlanta, Georgia, with the stated intention of facilitating the sale of Tidewater Marina and its associated real property." Warren's voice didn't change. "A letter of intent was signed 5 weeks ago. Mr. Aldworth represented himself in those negotiations as having the authority to sell. He does not have that authority. He has never had that authority." A man at a table in the middle of the room set down his water glass. I recognized him, the representative from Coastal Equity Partners. He had driven up from Atlanta for this evening. He had signed a letter of intent with Carver 5 weeks ago, believing he was dealing with someone who had the standing to make an offer. He was looking at me across the room with the expression of a man who has just discovered the foundation beneath him is not what he was told it was. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice carrying in the silence. "We were told the principal was unavailable, and that Mr. Aldworth had full delegating authority. We assumed he stopped. We should not have assumed." He looked at Carver. Then he looked at his table, and did not look up again. Warren set one final item on the table, a photograph, 8 by 10, black and white, mounted on cardstock. It was a photograph of my father, Harold Greer, taken sometime in the mid-1970s. He was standing at the end of what was recognizably the main dock at Tidewater, shorter then, 1/3 the length it is now, with a set of work gloves in one hand and his face turned toward the water. His posture was the posture of a man looking at something he intended to build. "Harold Greer first broke ground on this property in 1971, Warren said. "Walter Greer has maintained and expanded it every year since. He has been the sole owner and managing member of Tidewater Holdings LLC since 2002. His son Marcus was recently given a managing director role as an act of trust by his father, not by Mr. Aldworth, who had no standing to offer it." He looked at the room. "The man Mr. Aldworth has been describing tonight as marina staff is the man who owns the marina, has owned it for 22 years, and who, this morning before driving here, was out on the dock at sunrise doing the work himself." Marcus had not moved. He stood at the edge of the table with his hand pressed flat against his sternum, his eyes moving from Warren to me and back to Warren, running arithmetic that had never added up correctly before because he had never had all the numbers. "You work for my father," Marcus said. His voice was stripped completely flat. He turned to look at Carver. "You have been working for my father this whole time." Carver said nothing. "You sat at my parents' table at Christmas. You looked him in the eye." Marcus's voice rose slightly, then pulled back. "You told me for 2 years that you believed in me, that you saw something in me." His jaw tightened until the muscle showed in his cheek. "You were using me." Carver looked at his son-in-law for a moment. Something moved in his face that might have been the beginning of an explanation. Then it was gone, replaced by the controlled expression of a man who has been in enough rooms to know when one has turned entirely against him. He said nothing. Ellen Aldworth's chair moved. She had been sitting quietly at the front table through everything, through Marcus's words, through Thomas standing up, through Cassie's camera, through all of it. Now she stood and she didn't look at her husband. She walked across the room in the way a woman walks when she has made a decision that's going to be expensive and has decided the cost is fair. She pulled out the empty chair beside Diane and sat down. "I heard what that young man said to his father," she said, not looking at Carver. Her voice had the tired clarity of a woman addressing something long overdue. "I'm sitting here." Brianna's face went the color of the cream tablecloth. Carver picked up his leather portfolio from the table, tucked it under his arm. He looked at me one time, the look of a man who has played a long game and lost it on the final move, and then he walked toward the Harborview room door without a word. The room watched him go. The door had not fully closed behind him when Ray Delacroix, at the soundboard station in the corner, adjusted 2 levels and pressed play. The room filled with Marcus's voice, not the voice he had now stripped down and red-rimmed, the voice from 90 minutes ago, when he had been standing over me at this table with his finger on a signature line and his certainty at full volume. "Sign it, Dad. You've been hovering over this marina for 30 years and I'm the one running it now. Sign the paper and let me take it from here." A pause in the recording. Then, "Sign it. You're nothing but dead weight. You always have been." The playback ended. The silence that followed was the most complete I have heard in a room full of people in 64 years. Not the silence of shock. The room had moved past shock. This was the silence of 120 people sitting with something they had heard spoken live, hearing it again through the speakers of the building the speaker's father owned. Under South Carolina law, any party to a conversation may record it without the knowledge of the other parties. I was present in that room all evening. Ray had run the archive function since 4 o'clock. Everything was documented. Everything was legal. Marcus had not moved since the playback started. He stood at the edge of the table with his hand pressed to his chest and his mouth slightly open. When the last echo of his own voice faded from the room, he closed his eyes, his shoulders pulled inward. A sound came out of him that was not a word, low and broken, the sound of a man who has just heard himself from the outside for the first time and does not recognize what he hears. Thomas sat with his head bowed and his jaw working. Cassie lowered her phone. She looked at her brother for a long moment, not with the expression of someone who has won something, but with the expression of someone watching the thing they feared most become real and finding it exactly as painful as they'd expected. I stood up, slowly, the way I always stand, without drama. The way a man stands when his knees have 64 years in them and he has learned that most things worth doing do not require an entrance. I walked around the table, past Warren, who stepped back to give me room, past the folded transfer agreement, past the photograph of my father on the dock. I stopped when I was close enough to speak to Marcus without raising my voice. I didn't raise it. I built this place so you would have somewhere to stand, I said. Not somewhere to stand above me. I held his eyes for 3 seconds. Then I turned, and I took Diane's hand where she had risen from her chair, and we walked toward the door together. Behind us I heard Thomas push back his chair, then Cassie, and then, from the soundboard station in the back corner, Ray Delacroix began to clap. Slow at first, deliberate, the way Ray does everything. Then another pair of hands. Then another. By the time we reached the door, the sound had grown into something I did not turn around to look at. I didn't need to see it. I could feel it in the floor under my feet, in the walls of the building my father had started, and I had finished, moving up through the soles of my work boots, through 64 years of mornings that had begun before sunrise, through every dock plank I'd ever replaced, and every cleat I'd ever tightened, and every January morning I'd driven that 2-lane road before the rest of the county was awake. I held the door for my wife. We walked out into the Beaufort County night, cold and salt-aired, and very still. The creek, invisible in the dark, but there, the way it was always there, moving quietly under the dock whether anyone was watching or not. I slept that night, a clean, complete sleep, the kind that comes when a body has finally set something heavy down. I was on the dock by 5:30 the next morning. Old habit, 8 degrees colder than the day before, the water flat and gray, the color of the sky before it decides what it's going to be. I was checking the cleat at slip 14 when I heard boots on the dock behind me. Ray. Then 3 of the senior crew. Then 2 more. They pulled tools from the equipment locker and spread out along the dock without a word and began to work. That was enough. Marcus called 7 times that day. I let everyone go to voicemail. I wasn't ready. I kept working. 4 months later, on a Thursday afternoon in March, my phone rang. I was in the truck in the marina parking lot, engine running, about to head home. Marcus. I let it ring 3 times. On the 4th ring, I answered. Dad. His voice was careful and quiet, stripped down to something I hadn't heard in a long time. I don't know how to start this. Start anywhere, I said. A long pause. Can I come down? Not to talk about the marina or any of it. I want to help with whatever you're working on. If that's okay. I looked out through the windshield at the dock, at the creek, at the marsh stretching out flat and silver in the March afternoon light. There's a section of dock fencing on the north side, I said. 2 posts need resetting before the ground softens. It's wet, cold work. I know, he said. You'll need gloves, I said. The real kind, not dress gloves. A sound came through the phone. Something between a breath and a word. Something that had been waiting a long time to find its way out. I know, Dad, he said. I know. I kept my father's photograph on the wall of the marina office, the room I had been calling the operations room for 22 years, as though calling it mine would have required something I wasn't prepared to give. After the night of the rehearsal dinner, I went in there one morning and put a small brass frame on the wall beside the window where the morning light came in first. Harold Greer on the dock in 1975, face turned toward the water. No plaque, no caption. Ray came in the day I put it up. He looked at it for a moment. Then he nodded once and went back to work. That was enough. The civil case settled in the fall. Warren handled it. I didn't attend. The Coastal Equity Letter of Intent had died the night of the dinner the Atlanta representative withdrew within 48 hours, citing material misrepresentation by the counterparty. I was told Carver's attorney reached out to Warren 3 times. Warren handled those too. I don't know what became of Carver and Ellen Aldworth after that. I know what became of my son. He drove down on a Saturday morning in April with work boots and the right gloves and not a single word about the marina's revenue figures or his own career. We reset the fence posts and didn't talk about much. Around noon, Diane brought coffee out to the dock, and the three of us sat at the end of the dock in the cold spring sun, with the creek moving below us and the marsh going green at the edges, the first green of the year. Nobody said anything important. That was the most important thing that had happened in a long time. I want to tell you something directly. Before you go, I stayed quiet for years because I told myself it was protection. I watched my son walk into a man's scheme with no map because I had never given him one, and I told myself that was wisdom. It was not. It was fear dressed up as caution, and it cost everyone around me years they deserved to spend differently. If you are holding something back from the people you love, some truth about who you are, what you've built, what they're standing on, hear this plainly. The silence does not protect them. It only leaves the door open for someone who has less good intention than you do. My father told me what the land was worth the day he bought it. He didn't wait until I was 40 and someone else had already started making plans. Don't wait the way I waited. Say the true thing. Say it before someone else decides to use your silence against the people you love most. If this story reached something in you tonight, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're still with me, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for staying until the very end. It means more than you know.